Every gym has secrets. Most are hidden behind locked offices or old trophies gathering dust. Iron Wolf MMA Gym had a different kind of secret. Every night after the fighters left, the quiet janitor stayed behind, cleaning the mats before practicing strange movements nobody understood. Students assumed he was stretching old bones. Coaches barely noticed him, and the gym's undefeated karate champion caught him one evening and mocked the way he moved, challenging him to spar just for fun, while everyone recorded on their phones. The old janitor accepted without hesitation. No one understood why he looked completely calm. Only after the first exchange did they realize they had just challenged a man whose name had once dominated the biggest fighting stage in the world. Before we continue, can you tell us where you're watching from? We always love seeing these stories bring together viewers from all around the world, and it's amazing to know which corner of the world you're joining us from today. If you enjoy stories about hidden legends, second chances, and humble people proving that true greatness never needs to announce itself, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more unforgettable stories waiting for you. Most champions dream about hearing crowds chant their names. Very few dream about the day nobody remembers them. Iron Wolf MMA Gym sat on the edge of downtown Chicago, occupying what had once been an old warehouse. From the outside, it looked plain enough. Faded brick walls, a simple metal sign above the entrance, delivery trucks constantly passing along the industrial street. Inside, it was another world entirely. Heavy bags swung from steel beams. The sharp rhythm of gloves striking pads echoed through every room. The air carried the familiar scent of sweat, leather, and disinfectant. Pictures of famous fighters covered the walls. Regional champions, national champions, world champions. Every young athlete who walked through those doors believed one day their own photograph would join them. No one believed that dream more than Tyler Brooks, 27 years old, 3-time national karate champion, undefeated in professional point karate for almost 4 years. Fast, explosive, charismatic, he wasn't just the gym's biggest star. He knew it. Every morning, he entered Iron Wolf with headphones around his neck, while students stopped whatever they were doing just to greet him. "Morning, Tyler. You ready for Saturday? You're gonna destroy him." Tyler smiled at every compliment, not because he appreciated them, because he expected them. His coach, Victor Hale, watched quietly from the edge of the training floor. Victor had coached fighters for nearly 30 years. He'd trained disciplined champions. He'd also watched talented athletes destroy themselves with ego. Whenever he looked at Tyler lately, he worried. Talent was still there. Humility wasn't. Across the gym, someone else had already been working for over an hour. Before the first fighter unlocked a locker, before the first jump rope touched the floor, before anyone arrived, the janitor was already there. His name was Daniel. At least, that's what everyone believed. Nobody knew his last name. Nobody asked. He wore faded dark coveralls with the gym logo stitched over one pocket. Old work boots, thick rubber gloves. His dark shoulder-length hair always looked slightly messy. A short beard covered most of his face. He rarely spoke, unless someone spoke to him first. Every morning, he arrived at exactly 5:30, unlocked the maintenance closet, checked every room, repaired loose equipment, swept every hallway, then quietly disappeared into his work. To most people, he was simply the janitor. Not everyone ignored him. 8-year-old Noah certainly didn't. Every afternoon after school, Noah waited for his mother to finish teaching the children's self-defense classes. Instead of staring at his tablet, he followed Daniel around the gym, holding tiny trash bags, trying to help. Daniel smiled as Noah struggled to push an oversized mop bucket across the floor. Too heavy. Noah grunted dramatically. "I'm winning." Daniel chuckled. "Against the bucket. It's cheating. It has wheels." Daniel laughed. "Fair point." Noah finally managed to push the bucket into place. He looked proudly at Daniel. "Mom says cleaning is important." "She's right. My friends say it's boring." Daniel wrung out the mop. "Your friends probably haven't learned something yet." "What?" He smiled. "If you respect the place where you train, you'll eventually respect yourself." Noah thought about that. "So, cleaning makes you stronger." Daniel nodded. "In more ways than most people realize." Noah grinned. "I'm gonna tell Tyler that." Daniel smiled politely. "You can. I don't think he'll believe me." Almost on cue, Tyler walked past them, carrying his gym bag. He glanced toward Noah, then toward Daniel. "So," he smirked, "the maintenance crew's training new recruits now." Several nearby fighters laughed. Noah looked embarrassed. "I just wanted to help." Tyler shrugged. "You're wasting your time." He looked directly at Daniel. "Leave the dirty work to the professionals." Daniel simply nodded. "I intend to." Tyler laughed and continued toward the locker room. Noah looked upset. "He's mean." Daniel gently placed the mop against the wall. "No, he's confident. There's a difference." Noah frowned. "I don't think so." Daniel smiled. "One day, he'll learn the difference." Victor Hale had witnessed the entire exchange. He slowly walked over. "You've got more patience than I do." Daniel smiled. "I've got a mop." Victor laughed. "I suppose that helps." For years, Victor had tried getting Daniel to eat lunch with the coaching staff. Every time, Daniel politely declined. "I'm happier here." He always said the same thing. Victor eventually stopped asking, not because he didn't like him, because he respected him. "You fixing the cage again?" Victor asked. Daniel nodded. "One hinge came loose. I thought I tightened it yesterday." "You did?" Victor looked confused. "Then how?" Daniel smiled. "Things that take a lot of impact need constant attention." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "You talking about the cage?" "Our people." Daniel quietly returned to tightening the hinge. Victor smiled. "I'll take that as both." The day passed quickly. Classes came and went. Beginners, advanced students, conditioning sessions, private lessons. Every few hours, Daniel quietly appeared to clean spilled water, replace damaged tape, fix broken lockers, then disappear again. Most people barely noticed him. one person did. Tyler. Every time he walked past, he found another joke. Careful, don't let the mop beat you. Need me to teach you balance. Try not to polish the mats too much. His teammates laughed. Daniel never answered. Not once. Late that evening, the final class ended. Students slowly packed their bags. The gym grew quiet. Victor finished paperwork inside his office. Tyler realized he'd forgotten his phone charger. Grumbling to himself, he walked back inside. The lights on the main training floor remained on. He frowned. Who's still here? Then he heard movement. Not the sound of cleaning. Not footsteps. Something else. Rhythmic. Controlled. Curious. Tyler quietly walked toward the main cage. He stopped in the doorway. The janitor stood alone in the center of the mat. The mop bucket rested beside the cage door. The floor had already been cleaned. Daniel wasn't mopping anymore. He was moving. Slowly, one foot glided across the mat. His shoulders relaxed. His breathing perfectly even. His hands floated through unfamiliar motions. Not karate, not boxing, not wrestling, not anything Tyler had ever seen. It almost looked too simple, too effortless. Tyler folded his arms. So that's what you do after work. Daniel calmly finished the movement before looking up. I stretch. Tyler laughed. You call that stretching? Daniel smiled. I call it practice. Tyler stepped inside the cage. Practice for what? Daniel picked up the mop. For tomorrow. Tyler smirked. You know, I've been watching you for months. Daniel waited. I've never seen anyone move like that. A pause. Then Tyler laughed. Honestly, it looks ridiculous. Daniel didn't seem offended. Sometimes, the things that look the simplest take the longest to understand. Tyler shook his head. Or maybe they're just useless. Daniel quietly wheeled the mop bucket toward the exit. I hope you have a good evening. Tyler watched him walk away, then smiled to himself. An idea had just entered his mind. A cruel one. Tomorrow, the entire gym would be full. Students, coaches, visitors, sponsors. It would be the perfect audience. He looked back toward the empty cage, then whispered with a grin, let's see how funny those little moves look when everyone is watching. The next morning, Iron Wolf MMA Gym buzzed with more energy than usual. Saturday was always the busiest day of the week. Professional fighters arrived early for sparring. Parents dropped off children for beginner classes. Amateur competitors prepared for upcoming tournaments. The reception desk barely had a moment of silence. Phones rang constantly. Gloves struck heavy bags. Jump ropes slapped against the mats. Music blasted through the speakers. To everyone else, it was just another Saturday. To Tyler Brooks, it was the perfect stage. Daniel arrived at exactly 5:30, just as he always did. He unlocked the maintenance closet, checked the cleaning supplies, inspected the locker rooms, replaced 2 broken light bulbs, fixed a leaking sink in the men's restroom, then quietly pushed his mop bucket onto the main training floor. Nothing about his routine changed. Not a single step. Victor Hale watched from his office window. He smiled to himself. most reliable man in the building. His assistant, Lisa, looked over. The janitor, Victor, nodded. He hasn't been late once in 6 years. Lisa looked surprised. 6 years. Victor smiled. I trust him with keys to this entire building. She laughed. I barely trust Tyler with the coffee machine. Victor couldn't help smiling. Neither do I. Across the gym, Daniel noticed something lying near cage 2. A pair of expensive boxing gloves. Someone had forgotten them after last night's session. He picked them up, walked over to the lost and found cabinet, placed them neatly inside, then continued mopping. No fuss, no announcement, just another small task completed. Meanwhile, Tyler had arrived nearly 40 minutes earlier than usual. Not to train, to prepare. He gathered several teammates near the weight racks. Ethan, Logan, Chris, 3 of the gym's loudest personalities. Tyler leaned against the bench press. I've got an idea. Ethan grinned immediately. This should be good. Tyler nodded toward Daniel. You see him? Chris laughed. The janitor. Tyler smiled. I think today's entertainment just found itself. Logan folded his arms. What are you planning? Tyler lowered his voice. We're going to invite him into the cage. Chris burst into laughter. For what? Tyler smirked. A spar. The 3 immediately laughed. Ethan nearly dropped his water bottle. You're serious? Completely. Logan shook his head. He'll never agree. Tyler smiled confidently. Oh, I'll make sure he does. Across the room, Noah had already arrived with his mother. He immediately ran toward Daniel. Morning. Daniel smiled warmly. Morning. I practiced sweeping. Daniel looked impressed. How'd it go? Noah sighed dramatically. My room still looks messy. Daniel chuckled. That usually means you've got more practicing to do. The little boy looked toward the main cage. Are you teaching me that slow thing today? Daniel smiled. Maybe another day. Why, you've still got plenty to learn. From the fast things. Noah thought about that, then nodded. Mom says I skip steps. Your mom sounds wise. Tyler watched the conversation from across the gym. He rolled his eyes. The old man gives life lessons now. Chris laughed. What if the kid becomes a janitor too? The group laughed together. Victor looked up immediately. His expression hardened. He didn't like what he was hearing. Training began. Tyler looked sharper than ever. Fast kicks, perfect timing, powerful combinations. Students gathered around to watch. Every spinning kick earned applause. Every successful combination boosted his confidence. Tyler loved every second of it. He fed on attention. After finishing a particularly impressive sequence, he looked toward Daniel. The janitor was quietly wiping sweat from the edge of the mat. Without looking up, without watching, Tyler frowned slightly. Everyone else had applauded. Daniel hadn't even looked. Something about that bothered him, more than it should have. Victor noticed it too. He quietly walked over. You're distracted. Tyler shrugged. No, you missed your last 2 counters. Tyler looked surprised. I did. Victor nodded. You were watching him. Tyler laughed. The janitor. Victor folded his arms. You tell me. Tyler quickly grabbed another pair of gloves. I'm perfectly focused. Victor sighed. No, you're looking for someone else's approval. Tyler scoffed. I don't need approval. Victor calmly answered. Then stop trying so hard to earn it. The words lingered in Tyler's mind. Unfortunately, not for the reasons Victor hoped. Instead, they pushed him toward proving something. Around noon, the gym became packed. Visitors from neighboring gyms stopped by. Sponsors arrived for meetings. Several local reporters interviewed upcoming fighters. Iron Wolf buzzed with excitement. Exactly the audience Tyler wanted. Daniel quietly continued his work, replacing towels, cleaning mirrors, emptying trash bins. He remained almost invisible, exactly the way he preferred. Then, Tyler climbed into the center cage. He clapped loudly. Everyone. The noise across the gym slowly faded. Students turned. Coaches looked over. Even reporters paused their interviews. Tyler smiled. I think we've all worked hard enough. A few people laughed. So, let's have a little fun. Victor immediately frowned. He didn't like that sentence. Not coming from Tyler. Tyler slowly looked across the gym until his eyes landed on Daniel. The janitor had just finished emptying another trash can. Hey, Daniel looked up politely. Tyler pointed directly at him. You. Every head in the building turned toward Daniel. He quietly walked closer. Yes, Tyler smiled. I've got a challenge. Daniel waited. Tyler picked up an extra pair of sparring gloves, then tossed them toward him. Daniel caught them effortlessly. Several nearby fighters noticed. So did Victor. Interesting. Tyler grinned. You've been practicing those strange little moves every night. Daniel remained calm. I practice for myself. Tyler laughed. Perfect. He pointed toward the center of the cage. Then come practice with me. Several students immediately began cheering. Spar, spar, spar. Daniel quietly placed the gloves back on the edge of the cage. I appreciate the invitation. But no, Tyler smiled wider. Why not? I'm working. Tyler looked toward the mop bucket. We'll wait. Daniel shook his head. No. Tyler climbed down from the cage, walked until they stood face to face. What? You scared? Daniel smiled gently. No, I simply don't have anything to prove. Tyler laughed loudly. The entire gym heard him. That's what people say when they know they'll lose. Several fighters laughed with him. Daniel didn't react. He simply reached for the mop bucket again. Tyler stepped in front of it, blocking his path. You know, he smiled arrogantly. You clean this floor every day. Today, you can finally use it. After I wipe the mat with you. The crowd erupted into laughter. Even several visiting fighters smiled. Tyler spread his arms dramatically. Come on, it'll just be for fun. Daniel looked around the gym. Dozens of people were watching. Some amused, some uncomfortable. Victor started walking toward them, but Daniel quietly raised one hand. A subtle gesture, almost impossible to notice. Victor stopped. Daniel looked back at Tyler. His voice remained calm. What happens if I say no? Tyler shrugged. I'll probably assume You're exactly what you look like. And what's that? Tyler smiled. A loser hiding behind a mop. The gym fell silent. Even Tyler's teammates stopped laughing. The words had crossed a line. Noah looked down at the floor. His small hands tightened into fists. He hated hearing people speak to Daniel like that. Daniel remained quiet for several long seconds. Then, he gently leaned the mop against the wall, removed his worn rubber gloves, carefully folded them, placed them on top of the mop bucket. He looked toward Tyler, then calmly asked one simple question. If we do this, will you allow everyone else to continue training afterward? Tyler laughed confidently. Absolutely. Daniel nodded once. All right. He stepped past Tyler, opened the cage door, and calmly walked inside. For reasons nobody could explain. The moment the cage door closed behind him, Victor Hale's face turned completely pale, because the way Daniel had entered the cage wasn't the walk of a janitor. It was the walk of someone who had stepped into that place thousands of times before. The entire gym suddenly felt quieter. The cheering slowly faded, not because people were frightened, because something about Daniel had changed. Only moments ago, he had been pushing a mop bucket. Now, standing barefoot inside the cage, he looked strangely comfortable, like a man returning to a familiar room. Tyler bounced lightly on the balls of his feet, rolling his shoulders, stretching his neck. The crowd immediately began chanting his name. Tyler, Tyler, Tyler. He smiled proudly. This was exactly what he wanted. He looked across the cage. Daniel simply stood there, hands resting loosely at his sides, breathing slowly. His expression hadn't changed. One of the visiting fighters laughed. This'll be over in 5 seconds. Another nodded. Hope the old guy has health insurance. Several students laughed. Only Victor remained silent. Lisa quietly stepped beside him. You okay? Victor never looked away from the cage. No, she frowned. What's wrong? I don't know, but something isn't right. Across the gym, 8-year-old Noah squeezed through the crowd until he reached the front. His mother caught up with him. Noah, I want to watch. She looked toward Daniel. He doesn't have to do this. Noah quietly answered. I don't think he's doing it. Because of Tyler. She looked confused. What do you mean? Noah smiled. I think he's doing it. Because he promised. Inside the cage, the referee for the afternoon sparring sessions climbed through the ropes. His name was Marcus, former amateur kickboxer, 10 years of coaching experience. He looked between the two men. You both understand this is controlled sparring. Tyler answered immediately. Of course. Marcus looked toward Daniel. And you? Daniel nodded. I understand. Marcus hesitated. You've sparred before. Daniel smiled politely. A little. Tyler laughed loudly. A little. The crowd laughed with him. Daniel didn't respond. Marcus continued. No elbows. No knees. No submissions. Touch gloves. And stop immediately if I call it. Tyler nodded confidently. Daniel simply inclined his head. Marcus stepped backward. You ready? Tyler raised his gloves. Ready? He looked toward Daniel. You. Daniel slowly raised his hands. Not high, not low, just comfortably. Marcus frowned. That guard looked unusual. He couldn't place it. Begin. Tyler exploded forward immediately. Fast jab, cross, low kick, a combination he'd landed hundreds of times. The crowd leaned forward. Daniel wasn't there. He hadn't jumped. He hadn't blocked. He had simply taken one small step sideways. The punches sliced through empty air. Tyler blinked. He immediately reset. Again, another combination. Faster this time. Daniel shifted his weight. Barely an inch. The kick missed completely. Tyler's foot landed awkwardly. The crowd laughed. Not at Daniel. At Tyler. He quickly recovered. It was a slip. One teammate shouted, "Shake it off." Victor folded his arms. His heartbeat had begun to rise. That wasn't luck. Nobody slipped twice against someone who wasn't attacking. Tyler circled. "Stop moving." Daniel smiled. "I am moving. You know what I mean." "I do." Tyler attacked again. Spinning back kick. One of his signature techniques. Students loved it. He had won championships with it. The moment his hips turned, Daniel quietly stepped inside the arc. The kick passed harmlessly behind him. No collision, no block, no strike, just empty space. Tyler landed, facing the wrong direction. The crowd grew quieter. Marcus frowned. Interesting, very interesting. Tyler turned quickly. "What are you doing?" Daniel answered honestly. "Avoiding you. You afraid to fight?" Daniel smiled. "I thought this was sparring." "It is. So, why are you angry?" Tyler didn't answer. Instead, he rushed forward again. Left hook, right straight, body kick, back fist. Every technique flowed perfectly. Every technique missed. Daniel's feet seemed to glide effortlessly across the mat. Not running, not retreating, simply never standing where Tyler expected. The reporters lowered their cameras. Something unexpected was happening. One quietly whispered, "Who is this guy?" Another shrugged. "No idea." Tyler stopped, breathing slightly heavier now. He stared at Daniel. "Hit me." Daniel shook his head. "No." Tyler frowned. "Why not? You asked me to spar." "I agreed." "I didn't agree." "To hurt you." The crowd exchanged puzzled looks. Tyler laughed angrily. "You couldn't hurt me." Daniel didn't argue. "I hope you're right." Victor suddenly remembered something. His eyes widened. Years ago, during a coaching seminar in Las Vegas, he had watched an old UFC highlight. One commentator had said something unusual. The hardest fighter to hit isn't the fastest one. It's the one who never wastes movement. Victor slowly looked back toward Daniel. His breathing became uneven. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." Tyler charged again, this time abandoning technique completely. Pure aggression, punch after punch, trying to corner Daniel against the cage. Students began shouting, "Finish him, trap him, don't let him breathe." Daniel calmly continued moving. Small steps, tiny angles, relaxed shoulders. Every attack missed by inches. Tyler's frustration grew with every second. Marcus noticed something astonishing. Daniel hadn't thrown a single punch. Not one. 2 full minutes passed. Tyler finally backed away. Sweat covered his forehead. He looked exhausted. Daniel's breathing remained perfectly steady, not even slightly winded. One young student quietly tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, what? Why can't Tyler hit him?" His father frowned. I don't know," Victor quietly answered, though no one had asked him. "Because he's chasing him." Lisa looked over. "What?" Victor never took his eyes off the cage. The old man isn't fighting Tyler. He's fighting Tyler's impatience. Tyler clenched his jaw. "I'm done playing." He looked toward Marcus. "Take the brakes off." Marcus frowned. "This is controlled sparring." Tyler ignored him. He pointed directly at Daniel. "You've embarrassed me long enough." Daniel quietly replied, "No, you embarrassed yourself the moment you stopped trying to learn." Those words hit harder than any punch could have. The gym fell completely silent. Tyler's face turned red. For the first time in years, someone had corrected him without raising their voice. He removed his mouthguard, spat it onto the mat. "I don't want to spar anymore." Daniel looked at him calmly. "What do you want?" Tyler slowly raised his fist. His voice echoed across the entire gym. "I want a real fight." Marcus immediately stepped forward. "No." Tyler never looked away from Daniel. "No rules. No holding back. If you're really as good as you think, prove it." Daniel remained completely still. For several long seconds, he simply looked at Tyler. Then, he quietly asked one question that made Victor Hale's heart sink. "Are you absolutely certain that's what you want?" The gym fell completely silent. Even the air seemed heavier. Nobody cheered anymore. Nobody laughed. Tyler stood in the center of the cage, fists clenched, breathing hard. Across from him, Daniel remained perfectly calm. Marcus immediately stepped between them. "No." He looked directly at Tyler. "This session is over." Tyler never took his eyes off Daniel. "Move." Marcus folded his arms. "I said it's over." Tyler shook his head. "No." I challenged him. "I'm finishing this." Victor finally walked toward the cage. His voice carried across the gym. "Tyler." Everyone turned. The head coach rarely interrupted sparring. When he did, people listened. Tyler looked over. "Coach." Victor climbed into the cage. His expression was serious. "Step outside." Tyler frowned. "What? You heard me." Tyler laughed nervously. "Because I missed a few punches." Victor looked him directly in the eye. "No, because you no longer know why you're fighting." The entire gym remained silent. Tyler looked embarrassed. "You think I'm scared?" Victor answered immediately. "No, I think your pride is." Tyler scoffed. "I'm not backing down." Victor sighed. "I was hoping you wouldn't say that." Daniel quietly stood beside the cage, waiting, not impatiently, simply waiting. Victor slowly turned toward him. For several long seconds, the two men simply looked at each other. Then Victor quietly asked, What gym? Several students exchanged confused glances. Daniel smiled faintly. I've trained in several. Victor nodded. I figured. He hesitated, then asked another question. Who was your coach? Daniel looked toward the floor. For the first time, his expression softened. His name was Kenji Sato. Victor froze. His breathing stopped. No, he whispered. One of the assistant coaches looked confused. You know that name? Victor slowly nodded. I've never met him, but every serious MMA coach knows who he was. The reporters immediately looked up. One grabbed his notebook. Another lifted his camera. Tyler looked between them. Who's Kenji Sato? Victor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked back at Daniel. You trained under him. Daniel quietly nodded. For many years, Victor swallowed. The man who built champions without ever stepping into the spotlight. Daniel smiled. He preferred teaching. Victor slowly looked around the cage, then back at Daniel. And you're telling me you were one of his students? Daniel answered simply. I was. Tyler rolled his eyes. So what? Victor looked sharply toward him. So, he stepped closer. There are only a handful of fighters who ever trained directly under Kenji Sato. Tyler folded his arms, and Victor's voice became quieter. They weren't ordinary fighters. Daniel gently interrupted. Victor, the coach looked back. Please, don't. Victor understood immediately. Daniel didn't want attention. He didn't want his past discussed. Victor respected that. He nodded once. I'm sorry. Tyler laughed loudly. So we're playing mystery games now. He pointed toward Daniel. What are you? Some secret ninja. A few nervous laughs came from the back of the gym. Daniel simply smiled. I'm a janitor. Tyler shook his head. No, you're hiding something. Daniel quietly replied. Everyone is. The words lingered. Marcus looked toward Victor. What do we do? Victor answered immediately. The spar is finished. Tyler slammed his glove against the cage. No, he pointed directly at Daniel. I challenged him. He accepted. We're finishing. Victor shook his head. No. Tyler looked furious. Why? Victor finally answered honestly. Because. He paused. I don't believe you understand who you're standing in front of. The gym became completely silent. Every student looked toward Daniel. He simply sighed. I told you. I'm just the janitor. Victor looked at him. You've spent years making sure people believed that. Daniel smiled. It made life peaceful. Tyler laughed sarcastically. So what? You expect me to believe? This guy was some world champion. Daniel looked toward him. I don't expect you to believe anything. Tyler stepped closer again. His frustration had completely taken over. No, you've embarrassed me. In front of my teammates. In front of sponsors. In front of reporters. He raised his fists once more. So either fight me, or admit you've been running. Daniel quietly closed his eyes for a moment, almost as though remembering something. When he opened them again, there was sadness in them. Not anger. Sadness. No one wins. When a fight begins because of pride. Tyler laughed. Save the speeches. Daniel slowly removed the gym keys from his pocket. Then he unclipped the small employee badge hanging from his coveralls. He walked toward the corner of the cage, carefully placed the badge beside his folded work gloves. Then he took off the faded maintenance jacket. Underneath, he wore nothing more than a simple black athletic shirt. No logos, no sponsors, no championship patches, nothing that hinted at his past. He rolled up his sleeves. Several old scars became visible across his forearms. Marcus noticed them immediately. So did Victor. Those weren't ordinary scars. They were the kind left behind by years inside professional cages. Daniel looked toward Marcus. I have one request. Marcus nodded. What is it? If this goes badly, stop it immediately. Tyler laughed. Finally, some confidence. Daniel quietly shook his head. I'm not talking about me. The laughter stopped. Victor's heart sank. He knew exactly what Daniel meant. Daniel slowly walked back toward the center of the cage. For the first time, he didn't stand casually. His posture changed. His feet settled naturally beneath him. His shoulders relaxed completely. His hands rose, not dramatically, not aggressively, simply like they had done thousands upon thousands of times before. Victor whispered under his breath, I've seen that stance. Lisa looked toward him. Where? Victor didn't answer. He couldn't, because his mind was racing through old UFC broadcasts he'd watched years ago. A fighter who barely moved. A fighter who made champions miss. A fighter who disappeared at the peak of his career. Tyler smiled confidently. There you are. He bounced lightly. This is what I wanted. Daniel looked at him with quiet compassion. No, he spoke softly. This is what your ego wanted. Marcus looked between them. He hated what was happening. Every instinct told him to stop the match. But both men were willing. Both understood the risks. He slowly stepped backward, then raised one hand. This is your final warning. If either of you loses control, I end it immediately. Daniel nodded. Tyler nodded. Marcus took one final step back. He looked at both men, then dropped his hand. Fight. The gym held its breath, because no one there realized they were about to witness the moment a forgotten legend stepped back into the world for the first time in over a decade. Marcus stepped backward. The cage fell silent. Outside, the entire gym seemed to stop breathing. Even the heavy bags hanging from the ceiling barely moved. Every eye remained fixed on the two men standing in the center of the mat. Tyler bounced lightly. His confidence had returned. He smiled. Don't worry. I'll try not to embarrass you too badly. Daniel simply nodded. Thank you. Tyler frowned. The answer wasn't sarcastic. It was genuine. For some reason, that irritated him even more. Without warning, Tyler exploded forward. A lightning-fast jab, cross, lead hook, roundhouse kick, a combination that had earned him countless victories. Daniel moved. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough. The jab brushed empty air. The cross missed by inches. The hook found nothing. The kick sliced harmlessly past his shoulder. Tyler landed, immediately turned. Daniel hadn't even changed his expression. The crowd grew quiet. Someone whispered. Again, another fighter frowned. How? Tyler attacked a second time. This time, he feinted low, then launched a spinning hook kick toward Daniel's head. The technique was beautiful, precise, powerful. Daniel calmly stepped half a foot to his left. The kick missed completely. Tyler's momentum carried him past. Daniel never touched him. Marcus blinked. He had officiated hundreds of sparring matches. He had never seen someone make movement look so effortless. Victor folded his arms tighter. His assistant quietly leaned toward him. Coach, Victor answered without looking away. I know. No, I don't think you do. Victor swallowed. Oh, I think I finally do. Tyler backed away. His breathing had become noticeably heavier. Daniel still looked as though he had just finished folding towels. The karate champion smiled angrily. You still haven't thrown a punch. Daniel nodded. I know. You think you're above me. No, I think you're angry. Tyler laughed. So what? Daniel answered calmly. Angry people stop seeing clearly. Tyler charged again. This time, he abandoned combinations. Everything became power. Wild hooks, heavy kicks, driving Daniel toward the cage. The students erupted. Finish him. Corner him. Go. Daniel continued moving. One small angle, then another. His feet barely left the canvas. Every attack missed. Every movement looked almost lazy. Yet somehow, Tyler couldn't touch him. 5 minutes earlier, the gym had been laughing at the janitor. Now, nobody laughed anymore. One reporter quietly lowered his camera. I've seen this before. The second looked surprised. Where? I can't remember, but I've seen someone move exactly like this. Marcus finally called. Break. Tyler stepped backward. Daniel immediately lowered his hands. Marcus looked at Tyler. You okay? I'm fine. He looked at Daniel. No more games. Daniel smiled gently. There were never any games. The match resumed. Tyler took a deep breath. This time, he slowed down. Victor noticed immediately. Good. Finally, Tyler was beginning to think. He circled, watching Daniel's shoulders, watching his hips, trying to predict movement. For several seconds, neither man attacked. Then, Daniel spoke, quietly, only loud enough for Tyler to hear. Better. Tyler frowned. What? You're finally watching. I've been watching. Daniel slowly shook his head. No, you've been looking. There's a difference. Tyler lunged. Daniel's right foot quietly slid backward. His left shoulder turned. Tyler's punch missed. For the first time, Daniel moved his hand. Not to strike, just a gentle tap against Tyler's forearm. Nothing more. Barely enough force to wrinkle the fabric of his glove. Tyler stumbled sideways, completely off balance. The crowd gasped. What was that? I don't know. He barely touched him. Marcus stared. That wasn't strength. That was timing. Perfect timing. Tyler regained his footing. His eyes narrowed. He no longer looked amused. He looked confused. "What did you do?" Daniel answered honestly. "You did it." Tyler frowned. "I did. You were already falling. I simply helped you finish." Tyler clenched his jaw. "Stop talking." Daniel nodded. "As you wish." For the next 30 seconds, the cage became almost silent. Tyler attacked. Daniel avoided. Again, again, again. Every failed attack chipped away at Tyler's confidence. Not because he was losing, because he couldn't understand why. Outside the cage, Noah tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, what?" Mr. Daniel isn't trying to win. His mother looked carefully. She slowly realized the little boy was right. Daniel had never tried to land a strike. "Not one," Victor quietly whispered. "He's teaching." Lisa looked at him. "What?" "He's giving Tyler every opportunity to slow down, to think, to learn." She frowned. "During a fight?" Victor nodded. "No." He smiled sadly. "During a lesson." Tyler suddenly roared. "I don't need a lesson." He launched the fastest combination of the afternoon. 3 punches, 2 kicks, a spinning elbow he wasn't even supposed to throw. Marcus immediately stepped forward. Elbow, but it was already too late. The elbow flew toward Daniel's temple. For the first time, Daniel's expression changed. Not to anger, to disappointment. His right hand rose. Smoothly, effortlessly, he caught Tyler's wrist in midair. The entire gym froze. No struggle, no explosion of force. Just one perfectly timed movement. Tyler pulled. Nothing happened. He pulled harder. Still nothing. It felt as though his arm had been locked inside solid concrete. His eyes widened. Daniel quietly looked at him. His voice remained calm. "I asked you if you were certain." Tyler couldn't answer. For the first time that day, he realized something terrifying. The old janitor hadn't been surviving. He had been choosing not to end the fight. Daniel gently released Tyler's wrist, took one small step forward. Then, for the very first time, he threw a punch. It wasn't fast. It wasn't flashy. It traveled less than 6 inches. A short, controlled straight to Tyler's chest. Tap. Nothing more. Tyler blinked. Then suddenly, his legs disappeared beneath him. He dropped onto one knee, gasping, unable to breathe. The gym exploded with shocked voices. He barely touched him. What happened? Was that even possible? Marcus immediately knelt beside Tyler. "You okay?" Tyler nodded weakly. He struggled to inhale. "Can't catch my breath." Daniel calmly stepped back. "He'll be fine." Marcus looked up. "What did you do?" Daniel answered quietly. "I reminded him that power doesn't always come from force." Victor slowly walked into the cage. His hands were trembling. He looked directly into Daniel's eyes. Then, in front of every student, every coach, every sponsor, and every reporter, Victor asked the question that had been haunting him since the fight began. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Daniel." He paused. What was your real name? Before you disappeared. The gym became so silent that even Tyler forgot about the pain in his chest. Everyone looked at the quiet janitor, waiting, because deep down, they already knew whatever answer came next would change the way they saw him forever. Daniel looked at Victor. A faint smile appeared, not because the question amused him, because he had always known. One day, someone would ask. He slowly looked around the gym, at Noah, at Lisa, at Marcus, at the dozens of young fighters staring back at him, then quietly said, "My name has always been Daniel." Several people exchanged confused looks. Victor nodded slowly. "I know." He took another careful step forward. "But that's not the name the fighting world knew." Daniel lowered his eyes. "No, it isn't." Tyler finally managed to stand, still rubbing his chest. He looked at Daniel with completely different eyes now. Not angry, not confident, curious. "Who are you?" Daniel smiled gently. "I'm the janitor." Tyler shook his head. "No, I've watched you for months. You never once acted like this. You never even looked at us." Daniel quietly corrected him. I simply wasn't judging." Victor slowly exhaled, then turned toward everyone watching. "I've spent 30 years coaching. I've studied every great champion I could. I've watched thousands of hours of professional fights." He looked back at Daniel. There was one fighter none of us ever understood. The reporters immediately lifted their cameras again. Victor continued. He won title after title. He made world-class fighters look ordinary. He defended the UFC championship without ever celebrating. He'd help the man he'd just defeated back to his feet. He thanked every referee. He bowed to every opponent. Lisa whispered, "I remember him." Victor nodded. Then, one night, after successfully defending his championship, he disappeared. No retirement speech, no interviews, no farewell tour, nothing. One day, the world knew his name. The next, he was simply gone. A reporter slowly stepped closer. His voice trembled. "Coach, you don't mean..." Victor nodded. "I do." He looked directly at Daniel. "The man standing in this cage is Keanu Reeves." The gym became completely silent. Then, one sponsor laughed nervously. "That's impossible." Another whispered, "No, I've seen those old fights." One of the older coaches suddenly grabbed his phone. His hands shook as he searched. Within seconds, a grainy UFC photograph appeared on the screen. A younger man, shorter beard, shorter hair, championship belt over his shoulder, calm expression. The coach slowly looked from the photograph to Daniel, then back again. His face turned pale. "It's him." The phone passed from hand to hand. Students crowded around, one after another. Every expression changed. Shock, disbelief, confusion. A young amateur fighter whispered, "I've watched his highlights 100 times." Another looked at Daniel. "I didn't recognize him." No one did. Tyler stood frozen. His legs suddenly felt weak. He replayed every joke he'd made over the past 6 months. "Human mop. Loser, fight me for fun. Every word hit him like a punch. Noah looked confused. He tugged on his mother's sleeve. Mom, what? Mr. Daniel's famous. She smiled softly. I think he used to be. Noah frowned. But he still cleans. Daniel overheard him. He smiled. Yes, I still clean. Marcus finally spoke. Why? Daniel looked at him. You could own gyms. You could be on television. You could coach champions. You could make millions. Daniel nodded. I could. Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. So, why become a janitor? Daniel was quiet for several moments. When he finally answered, his voice was softer than before. 12 years ago, I won my final championship. The entire gym listened. I returned home, thinking I'd accomplished everything I'd ever wanted. His smile slowly disappeared. When I opened my front door, my wife was gone. Silence. She hadn't left me. He swallowed. A drunk driver had taken her life that afternoon. No one moved. No one even breathed loudly. Daniel looked toward the empty championship posters hanging high on the wall. I spent years believing if I became the best fighter in the world, I'd finally be happy. He smiled sadly, but standing with that championship belt, I realized something. He paused. The belt couldn't hug me. It couldn't talk to me. It couldn't bring her home. Several students quietly lowered their heads. Even Tyler couldn't look at him anymore. Daniel continued. I defended that championship. One last time. Then I left. Victor nodded slowly. You walked away while everyone thought you were still in your prime. Daniel smiled. I was. So why disappear? Daniel looked around the gym. Because I wasn't looking for another title. I was looking for peace. Lisa quietly wiped away a tear. I never knew. Daniel smiled gently. Most people didn't. I wanted it that way. Tyler slowly walked toward him. Every step felt heavier than the last. When he finally stood in front of Daniel, his voice barely worked. I'm sorry. Daniel looked at him. I know. No. Tyler shook his head. You don't. I called you names. I laughed at you. I made everyone else laugh too. His eyes filled with tears. And you never once tried to embarrass me back. Daniel smiled. What would have been the point? Tyler looked down. I would have done it. Daniel nodded. I know. Tyler slowly removed his gloves, dropped them onto the mat. Then, to everyone's complete surprise, he bowed deeply, not the quick bow fighters gave before competition. A full bow, one of genuine respect. I'm sorry, Mr. Reeves. Daniel immediately shook his head. No. Tyler looked confused. My name is Daniel. Tyler smiled through tears. Then, I'm sorry, Daniel. Daniel placed one hand gently on his shoulder. Accepted. Victor quietly watched the moment, then looked around the gym. I hope everyone here just learned something. No one answered. They didn't need to. They already had. At that moment, a reporter slowly raised his hand. Mr. Reeves. Daniel smiled. Daniel. The reporter nodded. Daniel, can I ask one question? You already have. The reporter laughed nervously. One more. Daniel nodded. Go ahead. The reporter looked directly at him. The entire fighting world has spent 12 years wondering where you disappeared. He paused. What should I tell them? Daniel looked around Iron Wolf MMA Gym, at the freshly cleaned mats, at Noah holding a broom, almost taller than himself, at Tyler quietly helping Marcus put the sparring equipment away without being asked. Then he smiled. Tell them, I finally found what I was fighting for. The reporter slowly nodded, but before anyone could ask another question, the front doors of the gym suddenly burst open. 3 men in expensive suits hurried inside. The oldest one looked around frantically. The moment he saw Daniel, his eyes widened. He walked straight toward the cage. Then, without caring who was watching, he extended his hand and said, Champion, we've spent 12 years searching for you. The entire gym stared in stunned silence, because whatever Daniel had left behind clearly had never stopped looking for him. The gym stood frozen. No one spoke. The 3 men in tailored suits stopped beneath the cage. The oldest among them kept his hand extended. His silver hair was neatly combed. His posture was perfect, yet his eyes betrayed genuine emotion. He wasn't looking at a celebrity. He was looking at someone he'd been hoping to find for more than a decade. Daniel looked at him quietly. A faint smile crossed his face. I wondered how long it would take. The man laughed softly. 12 years. Daniel nodded. I suppose that's longer than I expected. The older gentleman finally lowered his hand. He looked around the gym, then smiled awkwardly. I should introduce myself. He turned toward everyone watching. My name is Robert Collins. I'm the current president of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. The reporters immediately gasped. Cameras began flashing. Students exchanged stunned looks. The president of the UFC, standing inside Iron Wolf MMA Gym, looking for their janitor. Tyler felt another wave of guilt wash over him. He quietly whispered to himself, I called him the human mop. Noah looked at Tyler. It's okay. Tyler looked surprised. What? My friend Daniel says. Good people admit when they're wrong. Tyler smiled sadly. He really does say that. Robert Collins climbed into the cage. The 2 other executives followed behind him. One carried a leather briefcase. The other held a thin folder. Robert looked directly at Daniel. I've imagined this conversation more times than I can count. Daniel smiled. I've tried avoiding it. I noticed. Victor folded his arms. You really searched for him. Robert looked toward the coach. We searched everywhere. He looked back at Daniel. We contacted your old trainers, your former opponents, friends, hotels, hospitals. We even hired private investigators. The gym remained silent. Robert smiled. One investigator told me. He believed you'd moved overseas. Daniel chuckled. I moved across town. Several people couldn't help laughing. Robert shook his head. 12 years. You disappeared. Less than an hour after defending the championship. Daniel nodded. I remember. You left the belt. I did. You left your gloves. Yes, you left a handwritten note. Daniel quietly smiled. I hoped it explained enough. Robert looked down briefly. It explained why you were leaving. He paused. It never explained why you never came back. Daniel looked around the gym, at the freshly cleaned mats, at Noah still holding the little broom, at Tyler standing silently beside Marcus, then back at Robert. I did come back. Robert looked confused. No, Daniel smiled. I just came back to somewhere different. Robert followed Daniel's gaze around the gym. His expression softened. So this, he looked toward the mop bucket. It was enough. Daniel nodded. It was. The younger executive opened the leather briefcase, carefully removing an elegant black presentation box. He handed it to Robert. Robert slowly opened the lid. Inside rested a beautifully polished championship belt. Brand new, the gold reflected the overhead lights. Several students instinctively reached for their phones. Robert gently held the belt. You know, there's something we've never told the public. Daniel smiled faintly. I can guess. Robert shook his head. I don't think you can. He turned toward everyone inside the gym. When Daniel retired, the organization wanted another champion immediately. He smiled, but the fighters refused. Several people looked confused. What? Robert nodded. The top contenders all said the same thing. He looked toward Daniel. They didn't want to win. A belt that had never truly been lost. The entire gym fell silent. Marcus whispered. They waited. Robert smiled. For nearly a year. Victor slowly closed his eyes. Respect. That kind of respect couldn't be bought. It had to be earned. Robert looked back at Daniel. We eventually crowned another champion. But he carefully lifted the belt. There has only ever been one. Lifetime honor champion. He stepped forward, and that belt has always belonged to you. Daniel looked at the championship. For several seconds, he simply stared at it. Then, he gently closed the presentation box. Without touching the belt, Robert frowned. You don't want it. Daniel smiled kindly. I've never stopped appreciating it. He looked around the gym again, but it stopped belonging to me. The day I left, Robert laughed softly. You really haven't changed. Daniel smiled. I was hoping not to. One of the reporters raised his hand. Mr. Collins. Robert nodded. Yes, if Daniel won't accept the belt. What happens now? Robert smiled. I honestly don't know. He looked toward Daniel. Maybe he does. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then, he slowly walked toward Noah. The little boy looked up in surprise. Me? Daniel smiled. Can I borrow your broom? Noah handed it over immediately. Daniel held the broom in one hand, then looked toward the championship belt. He smiled. When I first became champion, I believed this. He nodded toward the belt. Was the greatest thing I'd ever carry. He looked at the broom. I was wrong. The gym remained completely silent. Daniel gently handed the broom back to Noah. This helps people every single day. He looked toward the students. The belt proved I could beat other people. He smiled warmly. The broom reminds me to keep defeating my own pride. No one spoke, not because they had nothing to say, because they knew they had just heard something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Robert slowly nodded. I understand now. Daniel looked at him. Do you? Robert smiled. I came here hoping to bring a champion back to the UFC. He looked around the gym. I didn't realize I'd find a teacher instead. Tyler quietly stepped beside Noah. He looked at the little boy. Mind if I help? Noah smiled. With what? Tyler picked up another broom. Cleaning. The little boy laughed. I'll teach you. Daniel watched them together. A quiet smile spread across his face. Robert looked toward Tyler. You know, most champions spend years trying to leave behind a legacy. He smiled. I think Daniel just created another one. Before leaving, Robert reached into his jacket. He removed a small velvet box. Inside was Daniel's original UFC Hall of Fame ring. We kept this. He smiled, hoping one day we'd return it ourselves. Daniel looked at the ring. This time, he accepted it, not because it represented victory, but because it represented the people who had never forgotten him. As Robert prepared to leave, he turned one final time. The Hall of Fame ceremony is next month. Daniel smiled politely. I appreciate the invitation. Robert laughed. I had a feeling. Daniel nodded. I won't be there. Robert sighed. I know. He started walking toward the exit, then stopped without turning around. He asked, Can I at least tell the world where you are? Daniel looked around the gym, then smiled. You can. Robert waited. Daniel quietly answered. Tell them, if they really want to find me, they should visit the people who need help the most. Robert smiled. I think that's exactly where they'll look. The executives quietly left the building. The reporters remained speechless. Tyler stood holding a broom. Noah proudly showed him where the cleaning supplies were kept. Daniel looked around the gym one last time. Everything felt peaceful again, or so he thought, because the ringing phone inside Victor's office was about to bring news that would change the lives of everyone inside Iron Wolf forever. The gym slowly began returning to normal. Students picked up gloves from the floor. Coaches resumed conversations. The reporters gathered around the reception desk, each trying to decide how to write a story no one would believe until they saw the footage. Daniel quietly walked toward the corner of the cage. He picked up his folded maintenance jacket, slipped it back on, clipped the employee badge to his pocket, then reached for his rubber gloves. Tyler watched in disbelief. You, he laughed softly. You're really going back to work. Daniel looked at him. I never stopped. The phone rang again. Victor finally answered it. Iron Wolf MMA. A cheerful voice answered. Coach Hale. Speaking. My name is Sarah Whitman from the East Side Children's Hospital. Victor smiled politely. How can I help you? We're calling because today's charity exhibition has been canceled. Victor frowned. What happened? Our guest fighter was injured in a traffic accident this morning. I'm sorry to hear that. So are we. She sighed. We have nearly 200 children waiting. They've spent weeks preparing. They're heartbroken Victor slowly looked toward Daniel, standing beside the mop bucket. An idea entered his mind. He smiled. "Sarah, I think we may have found someone better." 30 minutes later, a small bus pulled into the hospital parking lot. Tyler helped unload training pads. Marcus carried gloves. Lisa brought bottled water. Several students followed behind. No reporters had been invited. No cameras. No sponsors. Just people wanting to keep a promise to children. Daniel stepped off the bus last, still wearing his maintenance jacket, still carrying his old mop bucket. Tyler looked confused. "You brought that?" Daniel smiled. "I use it every day." Inside the pediatric ward, children waited in wheelchairs. Hospital beds, reclining chairs. Some wore casts, some carried IV poles. Others had lost their hair during treatment. Yet the moment they saw the fighters, their faces lit up. A little girl whispered, "They really came." Her father quietly wiped away a tear. They did. The hospital staff applauded, not because famous athletes had arrived, because someone had kept a promise. Daniel slowly walked toward a young boy sitting alone near the window. The child's name tag read, Mason, age 10. Mason stared quietly at the floor. Daniel knelt beside him. "Mind if I sit?" The boy shrugged. "You can." Daniel sat beside him. "You don't seem excited." Mason smiled weakly. "I wanted to meet the champion." Daniel nodded. "So did I." Mason looked up. "They said he wasn't coming." Daniel smiled. "They were right." The boy sighed. "I wanted to ask him something. What if he was ever scared?" Daniel looked out the window. "Every fight." Mason frowned. "Really?" Daniel nodded. "The brave people aren't the ones who never feel afraid. They're the ones who do the right thing anyway." Mason quietly smiled. "My dad says that." He sounds like a smart man. Across the room, Tyler was teaching several children basic karate stances. But something had changed. Gone were the flashy spinning kicks. Gone were the dramatic celebrations. Instead, he knelt beside every child, adjusted their balance patiently, encouraged every small success. When one little girl lost her footing, he smiled. "Try again. You've got this." Victor watched from across the room, then quietly whispered to Lisa, "Now, he's becoming a champion." An hour passed. Laughter filled the hospital gymnasium. Children practiced punches using soft foam pads. Marcus pretended to lose every game. The nurses laughed harder than the kids. Even doctors stopped to watch. Mason slowly walked toward Daniel, holding a folded piece of paper. "I drew something." Daniel accepted it carefully. On the paper, a man wearing coveralls pushed a mop. Beside him, another man held a championship belt. Above both figures, the child had written in careful block letters, "They are the same person." Daniel smiled warmly. "I love it." Mason looked at him. "You know, I think the janitor is cooler." Daniel laughed. "So do I." Later that afternoon, the group returned to Iron Wolf MMA Gym. The building felt different now, not because of Daniel's identity, because everyone's attitude had changed. Without being asked, several students picked up towels from the floor. Others wiped down equipment after training. One young fighter quietly thanked Daniel for fixing his locker weeks earlier. Another apologized for never introducing himself. The gym hadn't simply discovered a legend. It had remembered something more important. Respect. Tyler approached Daniel one last time. He wasn't carrying gloves. He wasn't carrying a trophy. He was carrying a brand new mop. I bought this. Daniel smiled. For me? Tyler shook his head. For us? Daniel looked puzzled. Tyler smiled. I'm helping clean every Saturday. Several teammates immediately spoke up. So am I. Count me in. I'll help too. Within seconds, almost every fighter volunteered. Marcus laughed. Looks like your maintenance crew just got a lot bigger. Daniel smiled quietly. I've always believed people take better care of places. They help build. Victor walked to the center of the gym. He looked around at every student. Then, without saying a word, he reached up, removed Tyler's enormous promotional poster from the wall. Everyone looked surprised. Tyler looked confused. Victor carefully rolled it up, then placed it in storage. One student whispered, "Coach, aren't you putting up Daniels?" Victor smiled. No. He walked toward the large empty wall, then hung a simple wooden plaque instead. It contained only 8 words. Character is earned when nobody is watching. Nothing else. No photographs. No championship belts. No signatures. Daniel quietly looked at it, then smiled. I like that. Victor nodded. I thought you might. As evening settled over Chicago, Daniel finished mopping the final section of the training floor. He filled the bucket one last time, emptied the water, placed the mop back inside the maintenance closet, exactly the way he had done every single evening for 6 years. Before turning off the lights, he paused, looked across the empty gym. The same cage, the same heavy bags, the same mirrors. Only the people had changed. Tyler no longer saw a janitor. Noah no longer saw a famous champion. Victor no longer saw a mystery. They all saw the same man, a man who had discovered that the greatest victory in life was never winning a championship. It was becoming someone who no longer needed one. Daniel switched off the lights, locked the front door, and quietly walked into the cool evening air. Tomorrow morning, at exactly 5:30, he would return, not because the world needed a former UFC champion, but because one clean gym, one encouraged child, and one humbled fighter at a time was more than enough reason to keep showing up